teachers, parents, friends, brothers and sisters, thank you. Thank you for coming today. Today we have colleges, universities, towns, cities from the four corners of the United Kingdom, and from far and wide. We have come together to defend our education system, and we are in the fight of our lives.
On November the 10th, 2010, I joined thousands of demonstrators on the streets of London to protest the cuts to education funding proposed by the government's comprehensive spending review. The day started way too early at a press conference held by the NUS, where I was lucky enough to blag a seat.
I think today promises to be a real landmark in what is a much bigger campaign. Yes, today will be big. It's likely to be the biggest student demonstration, perhaps certainly in over a decade, and perhaps for even more. But I genuinely see this as the kickstart for a campaign that goes then into local constituencies, that makes politicians feel uncomfortable under the collar. And this is something that needs to be seen as something that's bigger than just students, because we need to start to get the general public on side with us as well.
And it's starting. Woo!
After I grabbed my press pass, we were off, and the march began in incredibly high spirits. The vibe on the streets was not what I'd expected, with whistles and congos in every direction. It felt more like Notting Hill Carnival. I guess that was to be expected from the clientele of a crowd like this, what with most of the demonstrators being students. As soon as the march was underway, I made use of the cramped quarters to grab some comments from the protesters around me.
It's just completely unfair that the students of the next generation are going to be crippled by debts, and that's what it is. People are trying to make a distinction between repayment and debt, which just isn't there. It's going to put off the poorest people, and it's just not fair.
More people aren't going to want to go uni. It's just going to be like, I can't afford it, so I'll just go mess about on the streets, or I'll just go and get a normal job and just do nothing. I know loads of my friends back at home who are like 17, 18 and having kids because they think that uni is going to be so expensive to go to. They've just got tied up in a job and a boyfriend, and they've just had kids. There's just nothing else to do.
We just got to hope that the message gets heard. I mean, especially for the Liberal Democrats, I think if they don't stick to their pledges, they've committed political suicide. I don't know how any Liberal Democrat MP can watch today and not think twice about what they're doing, especially someone like Nick Clegg. And hopefully it will show all the MPs and everyone who will be making the decision in Parliament in a couple of weeks' time just how many lives they'll be affecting if they make this decision to strip all public funding from universities and rise the fees.
I even managed to snag another opportunity to have a word with the man of the moment, Aaron Porter.
Well, we are sending out a message loud and clear to the Westminster government that there is no support, certainly amongst students and university staff, for these proposals. But I actually see this as the start of a bigger campaign where we take it into constituencies and we fight MPs on their own turf, particularly those, Liberal Democrats in particular, who stood on a manifesto to abolish tuition fees. You cannot seriously look students in the eye and say that you now want to treble them. As the comprehensive spending review starts to unravel, we start to see that this would be the complete abolition of state funding for arts, humanities and social sciences. Many departments, indeed some institutions, would question their viability. They cannot rely on student fees alone, and I think it would be an utter travesty for this government to give up on centuries of universities where we've been built up on the notion that universities should be a broad church based on academic pursuit and not on what is an economic return.
The march, by this point like a slow rolling river of whistles and placards, started to pool at the rally point outside the Tate Britain on Millbank. I pushed on ahead to stake out a decent point to shoot the rally from, and I was soon wedged in by the immense ocean of students, graduates and lecturers alike. I waited for the rally speeches to get going. I would have tried to chat to some more people, but by this point the crowd and the noise was overwhelming. So instead, I took the time to reflect on the day so far. The most significant part of the day so far had to be the collective atmosphere of the people who I'd been marching alongside and who now gathered together around me. Even though Chatting to people, the anger and sense of betrayal regarding the proposed cuts to education was evident, and I hadn't met a single person who didn't want to have a moan about Nick Clegg. There was an indisputable positivity among the crowd. Maybe it was because we felt that in these numbers we had to be making an impact, and that ultimately our demonstration would be successful in its task. Maybe it was just because the sun was shining. Whatever the reason, the crowd was already alive with passion before the rally speeches had even begun. But when Aaron Porter addressed the masses, our unity and the passion of our cause was more significant than ever.
We face an unprecedented attack on our future before it has even begun. This government's assault on our education is an attack on every single student, every individual teacher, every individual lecturer, every individual college, every individual university. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. We must fight back, and together we will fight. We will not tolerate the previous generation passing on its debts to the next, nor will we let politicians force us to pick up the bill to access a college and attend university education which was funded for them for free. We are here today to tell politicians that we will no longer accept broken promises. We will not tolerate their broken promises. The government's irrational and unjustifiable cuts to colleges and universities must be resisted. They will be resisted, and the resistance begins here today.
Undeniably, one of the most passionate and unifying issues amongst the protesters was the anger towards Nick Clegg.
I believe it's time for promises to be kept.
And his betrayal in backing down on the pledge he made to students to oppose any rise in tuition fees. In a film shown on the big screen at the rally point, this was really hammered home.
The plans that, as far as I can make out, both the Conservatives and Labour parties are cooking up in one way or another to raise the cap on tuition fees is wrong. We will resist, vote against, campaign against any lifting of that cap.
Once the rally was over and the 50-something thousand people lining the streets were told to go home, the atmosphere changed. The vibe seemed to deflate like a balloon. The crowd, it seemed to me, just didn't know what to do with itself. So I did what any good reporter would do, and I took the opportunity to grab some more thoughts and opinions from those around me.
I'm a member of staff, but protesting today to support the students as well as higher education in general. What really makes me very upset, because I'm a mother of 3 young teenagers, and what makes me upset is that I actually think that young people are getting really engaged with politics through Nick Clegg, and his stance about being different and not being like the other politicians, and now having just, gone completely against everything that he said. He's disillusioned a whole generation.
Absolutely. Complete cessation of funding for arts, humanities and social sciences, whacking increases in fees that are just going to recreate an elite higher education system, something which in my generation has gradually been diluted so that more and more people will go to university. It's going to get tougher and tougher for ordinary kids to go to university. It's a deliberate ideological attempt to complete the free market revolution that started in the 1980s.
Just when I was thinking about calling it a day, I heard talk of some windows being smashed. So with my press pass burning a hole in my pocket, I followed directions to the action and found myself heading towards Millbank Tower, the headquarters of the Tory campaign. From quite a distance away, it was already clear that there were a lot of people who just weren't ready to go home. So, in search of a story, I joined them. At first, it was difficult to see anything, and I was using the camera to try and get a better look at what was going on. When I was told there were some smashed windows, I wasn't expecting anything like this. The entire glass entryway to the Millbank Tower had been smashed, and I heard from members of the crowd that people had entered the building. It was then that the crowd appeared on top of the roof. At first, when they were setting off fire extinguishers, it was great. I, along with those around me, was filled with an anarchistic glee. But when they threw a bottle off the roof, the mood took a dramatic turn for the worse. Soon it was clear that the rooftop gang were basically taking advantage of the opportunity to cause trouble. A curious anxiety spread across the crowd, but when a fire extinguisher was thrown from the roof, the anxiety turned to fear and anger. But of course, a morbid curiosity stopped us, certainly me, from making a getaway.
Coming through! Stop throwing shit! Stop throwing shit! Stop throwing shit!
Violence is not the answer. We have to ask why we're here and why this has happened.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think this will do to what we've done today?
Up until this point, it was positive and an amazing thing. Everyone was coming together, and now it's turned into violent demonstration, which nobody wanted to happen. And people are resorting to things. There's people up there dancing. They're not here because they're standing up for the fact that we're going to be repressed. They're here to have a good time, which is I don't agree with, and that's not the sort of message we want to put across. So I think essentially this is they're going to have material to use against us, which is bad. And it's the few people that have done this, it's not the 45,000 other that are here for the right reasons.
The police, when they finally did arrive, were met with a barrage of sticks, stones and the occasional bottle. Their somewhat feeble attempts to take hold of the situation made no impact whatsoever. I couldn't help but feel cheated by the few people who had turned the march into this ugly situation. It wasn't the reason most of us were there, and of course the media would have a fit and ultimately detract attention away from the real reasons we were marching, the reason I was marching. But as Aaron Porter and many others over the course of the day have said, today is only the start. This is about something much bigger than today, much bigger than marching, bigger than fire extinguishers being thrown off buildings into crowds even. And I, for one, am going to keep the message alive by campaigning, by visiting my local MP, and by spreading the word as much as possible. I urge you to do the same. For more details on the national battle against cuts to education and the rise of tuition fees, stay in touch with the campaign through the National Campaign Against Fees and Cuts website,